China restricts or bans more than a dozen products, food additives, and tech practices that are still completely legal across the US and Europe. Some of these bans have been in place for over a decade. By the end of this video, you'll see why a country most people assume has looser rules is actually stricter than the West in several very specific areas, and what that says about how differently these two systems think about risk. Start with something as simple as food coloring. China has restricted the use of titanium dioxide as a whitening agent in food, after safety reviews raised concerns about it building up in the body over time. Meanwhile, in the US, that same white powder still shows up in powdered donuts, sauce packets, and countless baked goods on grocery shelves. It's not hidden. It's printed right on the ingredient list, and most shoppers walk past it without a second glance. The gap here isn't about secrecy. It's about two food safety systems reaching two different conclusions from the same research and choosing to act on it in completely different ways. That's just the additive list. The packaging on the shelf right next to it tells a similar story. Look at the bright colors in a Western candy aisle or cereal box. Several synthetic dyes that have been linked in studies to hyperactivity in children face much tighter limits in China. In the US, those same dyes are still approved under rules the FDA put in place years before this newer research even existed. So the product on the shelf hasn't changed. The science around it has moved, and only one country has updated its playbook to match it. Food is the surface-level part of this story, the part you can literally see with your own eyes in a store. But once you leave the grocery aisle and step into gaming, the restrictions get a lot more specific and a lot more surprising. Take loot boxes, the random item pulls inside mobile and console games that let players gamble small amounts of real money for a chance at rare digital items. China requires publishers to disclose the exact percentage odds of every single pull, out loud, in the game itself. It's a level of forced transparency that the gaming industry in the US has fought hard against adopting nationally, arguing it would hurt player experience. So millions of players in the West are pulling loot boxes with no idea what their real odds are, while players in China can check the exact math before they spend a single dollar. If that surprises you, wait until you see what China did to the amount of time kids are allowed to spend gaming in the first place. China legally caps online gaming for minors to just 3 hours a week, and only on weekends, enforced through mandatory facial recognition checks tied to national ID databases. There is no equivalent law anywhere at the federal level in the US. Parents there are left to manage screen time entirely on their own, often against apps that are specifically designed to keep kids playing as long as possible. But here's where it gets strange. It's not just gaming platforms enforcing this. It's baked directly into the country's internet infrastructure, which means a teenager can't simply lie their way past it the way they could with a parental control app back home. That same instinct shows up in short-form video. Under 14 users on China's domestic short video platforms hit a default nightly usage lock. Automatically, no parent required to set it up. Compare that to the West, where equivalent apps ship with parental controls that are optional, buried in settings menus, and easy for any kid to switch off in about 10 seconds. These first 5 examples are the surface layer, the stuff that's visible or countable just by looking at a screen. But the real story is underneath, in why these systems were built this way in the first place, and that's where things get a lot more interesting. Start with the fact that the version of a popular short video app used inside China reportedly runs different, more restrictive recommendation software than the version marketed everywhere else in the world. Multiple reports suggest the domestic version pushes more educational content and limits how long kids can be shown content that's designed purely to be addictive, while the international version optimizes almost entirely for watch time. Most users overseas have no idea this split even exists. They assume they're using the same app as everyone else in the world. That double standard becomes even clearer once you look at something as unexpected as skincare and cosmetics testing. China's cosmetics regulator has actually moved away from requiring animal testing for many imported beauty products, a policy shift that completely flips the old assumption that Chinese regulations were always the looser, cheaper option. For years, animal testing was the default requirement for anything sold there. Now, many imported cosmetic products can skip it entirely under updated rules, putting China ahead of several US states that still allow animal testing for cosmetics with no restriction at all. That's not even the impressive part. The impressive part is what China controls at the raw material level. China restricts export volumes of rare earth elements, the materials used inside phones, electric motors, and wind turbines, and there's really no Western equivalent to this kind of lever, mostly because the US and Europe don't have the reserves to control in the first place. It's not a ban on a product. It's control over the entire supply chain, feeding into millions of products at once, and it's a form of power that simply isn't available to regulators in the West, no matter how strict they want it to be. Controlling raw materials is one thing. Controlling entire financial markets is another level completely. In 2021, China banned cryptocurrency trading and mining outright, nationwide, closing an industry that had employed hundreds of thousands of people almost overnight. Compare that to the US and Europe, where retail crypto trading is still fully legal and regulated, with a comparatively light touch. Whole mining operations in China shut down literally within weeks of the announcement. Once you see how far that ban reached, the next one on this list won't come as much of a surprise. China also banned for-profit tutoring companies from operating on core school subjects, wiping out a multi-billion-dollar private education industry in a matter of months. Companies that had gone public on stock exchanges lost most of their value almost immediately. Meanwhile, private tutoring in the US remains a booming, completely unregulated market, with families spending thousands of dollars a year and zero government oversight over pricing or quality. These bans don't just affect single products anymore. At this scale, they reshape entire industries, and that ripple effect reaches even further than you might expect. Take ride-hailing apps. China requires ride-hailing platforms to store all user data domestically and pass a security review before they're even allowed to list on a foreign stock exchange. This next one doesn't make sense until you see the numbers. One major ride-hailing company had already completed its US stock listing when regulators forced a data security review that wiped out a huge chunk of its market value within days. There's no US law that gives regulators that kind of leverage over a tech company's data practices, tied directly to its ability to raise money on public markets. That same instinct for fast, sweeping action shows up in environmental policy too. China rolled out a nationwide phase-out of non-biodegradable plastic bags across its major cities years before most US states even adopted partial bans. Some cities went from plastic bags being standard at checkout to functionally banned within a single year. That same environmental urgency shows up again in how China treats vaping products. China banned flavored e-cigarettes nationwide, citing their appeal to teenagers, cutting off an entire category of vape flavors in one sweeping rule. In most US states, flavored vape products are still sold openly in gas stations and corner stores, with age restrictions that are inconsistently enforced at best. Public health bans like this one connect back to a much older pattern running through Chinese regulation, one that goes back further than most people realize. That pattern shows up clearly in agriculture. China maintains tighter restrictions on growing genetically modified crops domestically than the US does, even while it imports huge volumes of GMO grain from other countries to feed its livestock. It's a cautious at home, pragmatic abroad approach. Protect what happens inside your own borders tightly, but stay flexible about what comes in from outside. That pattern, protect the domestic system fiercely while dealing pragmatically with the outside world, actually explains almost everything else on this entire list. Widely documented analysis suggests China's regulatory bans cluster heavily around two things: social stability and the development of young people. Those are areas where a single central authority can act fast, without the years of legislative debate that similar rules would face in the US or Europe. And then they did something no one expected. Instead of slowly building consensus across multiple lawmaking bodies, the way Western democracies typically do, regulators there can identify a problem and have enforceable rules in place within months, sometimes even weeks. That speed comes from a specific structural advantage. Because China's system allows a single agency to write and enforce new rules without needing broad legislative approval, bans can go from proposal to enforcement in a matter of months. Compare that to the US, where similar restrictions on food additives, data privacy, or gaming often stall in committees and courts for years, sometimes indefinitely, watered down piece by piece before anything actually changes. That speed advantage sounds impressive on paper, but it comes with its own very real risk. The thing is, this was already old news 3 years ago among people who study regulatory systems closely. Reports suggest that same fast-moving system, the one that can ban a harmful food additive in a matter of months, can just as easily restrict an entire industry with almost no public input or debate beforehand. It's a trade-off Western systems deliberately avoid by design, favoring slower, messier processes that at least give industries and the public a chance to weigh in before anything becomes law. Both systems ban things. Both decide, in their own way, what crosses the line and what doesn't. The real difference isn't which country is stricter or looser overall, it's what each one considers worth acting on quickly and what each is willing to let ride in the name of individual choice. China moves fast on food safety, youth protection, and financial risk, while the West moves slowly but keeps the public in the room for the decision. Neither approach is free. One trades speed for input, the other trades input for speed. So the next time someone tells you China has looser rules than the West, you'll know exactly which 15 examples prove that's not the whole story. Which one of these surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments.